19 forgotten dishes woodcutters ate to work all day without stopping. Have you ever wondered what the true weight of a forest feels like when it rests entirely on the edge of a hand-forged blade? Could you survive a winter where the air is a razor and the only warmth comes from the violent friction of your own muscles? What remains of the men who built empires with nothing but sweat and the caloric fuel of a world that no longer exists? Is it possible that we have forgotten the very chemistry of endurance that allowed the human body to defy the limits of exhaustion? Why do we look at the ruins of the past and see only stone, ignoring the biological engine of the common man that moved every single one of those boulders? You might think that history is written in ink, but in the dense, damp forests of the Middle Ages, it was written in the consumption of energy so dense and primitive that it would break a modern constitution. Today, we peel back the layers of the woods to reveal not just trees, but a lost menu of survival. You will see that the woodcutter was not merely a laborer, but a biological machine fueled by a specific forgotten diet designed for one purpose: to never stop. Before we step further into this thicket of history and sweat, check if you are already subscribed to this channel. This is the only way to ensure you never lose access to the hidden depths of human resilience and the secrets of a past that shaped our very existence. The heavy gray mist of the English morning clings to the wool of your tunic like a damp shroud, a weight that never truly leaves your shoulders as you step into the shadow of the ancient oaks. You feel the crunch of frozen moss beneath your boots, a sound that signals the beginning of a 12-hour cycle where every movement must be calculated to preserve the internal furnace of the body. To stand in the center of this cathedral of timber is to understand that the woodcutter did not eat for pleasure, he ate for thermal density. The first forgotten dish of this grueling routine was the dense rye hardtack, a bread so dark and heavy it felt like a slab of kiln-dried earth in the palm of your hand. This was not the light, airy loaf of a modern kitchen, but a structural composite of rye flour, pea meal, and sometimes ground inner bark, baked until moisture was a distant memory. As you bite into it, the texture is unforgiving, forcing your jaw to work, sending the first signals to your stomach that a slow, steady release of energy is coming. It tasted of smoke and minerals, a saltless fuel that sat in the gut like a hot stone, providing the foundation for the first 1,000 swings of the axe. Beside this, they consumed the fat-back paste, a mixture of rendered lard and wild garlic smeared thick over the rye. The fat was not a condiment. It was the essential insulation against the biting wind that whipped through the clearing. You can smell the pungent, sharp aroma of the garlic cutting through the heavy scent of raw pork fat, a sensory contrast that kept the mind alert while the body absorbed the massive caloric load. This was the fuel of the giants who cleared the path for cathedrals and warships, a diet of necessity that turned a man into a force of nature. If you can feel the weight of this history and the sacrifice of those who came before us, comment the phrase, "My blood is made of ancient iron." Proceeding deeper into the grove, the light begins to shift, revealing the next layer of this survivalist architecture. As the sun climbs higher, filtering through the skeletal branches of the canopy, the damp chill of the forest floor begins to seep through your leather wrappings, reminding you that heat is a finite resource. In this environment, the woodcutter's second line of defense was the pottage of iron roots, a thick, gelatinous brew carried in small earthen jars wrapped in sheepskin to retain the morning's embers. This was not a soup by any modern definition, but a concentrated reduction of parsnips, turnips, and wild leeks simmered for hours until the fibers broke down into a starchy paste. You can feel the steam hitting your face, smelling of damp earth and boiled greens, providing a momentary reprieve from the scent of sawdust and pine resin. Within this mixture lay the secret of sustained motion. The inclusion of bone marrow and crushed eggshells added to provide the calcium and collagen necessary to keep joints from seizing under the repetitive shock of the axe hitting hardwood. Every swallow is a calculated ritual, a thick coating of warmth that slides down the throat to settle in the chest, radiating outward to the fingertips that have grown numb from the vibration of the wood. It is a humble, unglamorous fuel, yet it represents a masterpiece of medieval survival engineering, transforming the hardest roots of the soil into the fluid motion of a human limb. If you value the grit and the raw reality of this journey through the forgotten kitchens of the wilderness, leave a like on this video right now to help these stories of human endurance reach those who need to hear them. Beyond the liquid heat of the pottage, the woodcutter turned to the salted eel strips, a concentrated source of protein and essential oils harvested from the nearby marshes and dried over peat fires. These strips were tough as leather, requiring the men to chew them slowly throughout the mid-morning hours, a process that kept the digestive system active and the body's core temperature elevated. The salt was crucial, replacing the minerals lost to the relentless sweat that soaked through layers of linen and wool, even in the freezing air. You can almost taste the brine and the deep, oily richness of the fish, a sharp contrast to the blandness of the rye, a necessary spike of intensity in a world of muted grays and browns. This was the rhythm of the forest, a constant intake of dense, heavy matter to counter the constant output of violent physical labor. Each bite was a brick in the wall of survival, a defiance of the exhaustion that threatened to pull a man down into the frozen mud. We are only beginning to scratch the surface of these 19 lost meals, and the next layer of our journey takes us from the preserved fats of the marsh to the raw, wild energy found in the very heart of the timber. The shadows beneath the towering oaks begin to stretch, marking the transition into the most grueling hours of the workday, where the initial surge of morning energy begins to wane against the stubborn resistance of the timber. To maintain the frantic pace required by the overseers, the woodcutter turned to the hunter's pressed curd, a primitive form of dense cheese packed with wild herbs like sorrel and yarrow. This curd was pressed under heavy stones for weeks to remove every drop of moisture, resulting in a rubbery, concentrated block of protein that would not spoil even when carried against the heat of a man's moving body. As you tear a piece away, you notice the sharp, acidic tang of the sorrel, a flavor designed to cut through the coating of grease in the mouth and stimulate the production of saliva in the dry, dusty air of the clearing. It was a functional food, portable and indestructible, allowing the laborer to chew while the axe was mid-swing, ensuring that the blood sugar never dipped into the danger zone of tremors or fainting. This level of preparation was the difference between a productive day and a fatal accident, as a tired mind leads to a wandering blade. If you find this exploration of human limit testing fascinating, share this video with someone who appreciates the raw history of how our ancestors truly lived and worked. Alongside the curd, they relied on the dried boar sinew, strips of tough muscle cured in wood ash and wild honey. The honey provided a rare immediate spike of glucose, while the sinew forced a long, arduous mastication that released steady trickles of protein over several hours. You can feel the texture, resembling a tensioned cable, demanding effort from the teeth and jaws, a physical reflection of the work being done by the rest of the body. There is a brutal logic to this diet. Nothing was soft, nothing was easy, and everything required work. The woodcutter also harvested the inner cambium layer of the pine, a sweet resinous tissue that was scraped from the bark and chewed like a primitive gum. It provided vitamin C to ward off the lethargy of scurvy, and a fresh, antiseptic flavor that cleared the lungs of the fine wood dust that permeated every breath. You can smell the sharp, medicinal aroma of the pine mixing with the sweet scent of the honeyed sinew, a complex olfactory landscape that defined the midday break. This was not a meal enjoyed in repose, but a refueling conducted in the vertical, a desperate act of maintenance performed in the mud and the sawdust, where the only seat was a freshly fallen stump and the only music was the rhythmic thud of steel against bark. The forest provided, but it demanded a high price in return, and as we move into the structural heart of the afternoon, we see how these men managed the delicate balance between total collapse and the successful felling of a giant. The afternoon light turns a bruised purple as the temperature drops, a signal that the body's internal furnace is now under siege by the encroaching frost. To combat this thermal drain, the woodcutter relied on the blood-thickened porridge, a dense, iron-rich mixture of crushed oats and the gathered juices of livestock, seasoned with heavy doses of black mustard seed. This dish was a thermal catalyst, designed to trigger a thermogenic response that radiated heat from the core to the extremities, preventing the fingers from stiffening around the wooden handle of the tool. You can imagine the steam rising from a wooden bowl, a thick, metallic-scented vapor that speaks of survival at its most primal level. The mustard seeds were not for flavor, but for circulation, causing a slight flush in the skin and a sharpening of the senses when the monotony of the labor threatened to induce a dangerous trance. Every spoonful felt like a heavy injection of minerals, a physical fortification against the lethargy that comes with cold. Supporting this was the spruce tip infusion, a bitter, vitamin-heavy brew made by steeping the bright green tips of young conifers in boiling water. It tasted of resin and citrus, a sharp, astringent liquid that cut through the phlegm caused by inhaling smoke and spores from the forest floor. You feel the heat of the liquid traveling down your esophagus, a liquid thread of life in a world of freezing wood. This was the science of the medieval woodsman, a calculated rotation of fats for endurance, proteins for repair, and these thermal infusions to keep the blood moving when the world wanted it to stop. The environment was an enemy that could only be held at bay by the chemistry of what was consumed. As the trees continued to fall, the woodcutters moved with a rhythmic, mechanical precision, their bodies sustained by these forgotten recipes that prioritized the physics of heat over the aesthetics of taste. The balance was fragile, and as we look closer at the functional aspects of their mid-afternoon snacks, we see how even the smallest berries played a role in this grand architecture of human effort. The vertical world of the timberlands demands a diet that ignores the luxury of a seated posture, forcing the woodcutter to master the art of the standing feast. As you watch the sun dip lower, casting long skeletal shadows across the clearing, you witness the consumption of the sebum-crusted pastry, a dense pocket of dough made from unrefined barley and packed with rendered sweat. This was the pinnacle of medieval portable engineering, a structural vessel designed to be held by hands caked in pitch, sweat, and dirt. The thick, crimped crust served as a handle, a disposable grip that allowed the laborer to reach the calorie-dense center without contaminating his meal with the filth of the workday. Inside, the melting sweet fused with dried peas and bits of smoked fat, creating a molten core of pure energy that scorched the tongue and revived the spirit. You can smell the heavy animal scent of the tallow as it breaks open, a rich contrast to the sterile, cold air of the encroaching evening. This was the fuel that powered the final, most dangerous fells of the day, when the weight of the timber was at its peak and the precision of the cut was a matter of life or death. The woodcutter didn't just eat this pastry, he absorbed it, allowing the heavy fats to lubricate his internal systems and provide a slow-burning fire that would last until the stars appeared. Every bite was a defiance of the gravity that sought to pull the trees down and the exhaustion that sought to pull the man down with them. This was not food for the weak. It was a biological requirement for those who lived by the blade and the brawn. As the rhythm of the work continues, the focus shifts to the liquid companions of these heavy solids, drinks that were far more than simple hydration. The liquid lifeblood of the medieval woods was never mere water, for standing pools were often stagnant and the clear streams were too cold to be consumed in the volumes required by a body in constant motion. Instead, the laborers relied on small ale of the deep forest, a fermented liquid bread that served as the primary source of hydration and B vitamins. This was a thick, cloudy beverage, brewed from the third mashing of barley and flavored with a complex grout of wild herbs like bog myrtle, yarrow, and ground ivy. It did not have the clarity of modern beer. It was a living, yeasty suspension that felt heavy on the tongue and coating in the throat. You can smell the earthy, fermented tang as the woodcutter tips back a leather flagon, the liquid washing away the grit of oak dust and the metallic taste of the axe's edge. The herbs were selected for their ability to suppress pain and reduce inflammation in the joints, act as mild stimulants to the central nervous system, and prevent the fermentation of the heavy fats in the gut. Every draft was a medicinal intervention, a way to trick the body into ignoring the screams of overworked tendons and the dull ache of bruised ribs. Beside this, they often carried a leather canteen of salted whey, the byproduct of the morning's cheesemaking, rich in electrolytes and lactic acid. This thin, sour liquid provided a sharp, refreshing contrast to the cloying density of the ale, cutting through the fatigue that settles in the eyes when the light begins to fail. You can imagine the woodcutter's breath hitching as the cold, acidic whey hits his stomach, a sharp wake-up call to the nervous system. These drinks were the structural mortar that held the bricks of solid food together, ensuring that the biological engine didn't overheat or seize up under the pressure of the forest's demands. As the final giants of the day are marked for the fall, The transition from functional eating to the ritual of the evening begins to take shape. The contrast between the forest floor and the distant manor house is not merely one of wealth, but of biological reality, a divergence in the very substance of existence. While the nobility dined on delicate fowls and spiced wines that sought to mask the reality of the seasons, the woodcutter's table was the stump of a fallen titan, and his seasoning was the salt of his own brow. There is a profound, heavy silence that descends upon the clearing when you realize that every calorie consumed here was earned through a violent exchange with the landscape. The 17th dish of this forgotten list is the charred leek and marrow mash, a preparation where the vegetables were thrown directly into the white-hot embers of the brush fire. The outer skin would blacken and carbonize, creating a protective shell that steamed the sweet, fibrous heart of the plant within. When cracked open, the woodcutter would scoop out the softened insides and mix them with raw bone marrow, creating a rich, smoky paste that tasted of fire and earth. You can feel the heat radiating from the charred husks, a sensory anchor in the deepening blue of the twilight. This was the moment where stability met fragility. A man could be a king of the forest at noon and a broken heap of bones by dusk if his strength flickered for even a second. The abundance of the forest was an illusion that only the strong could maintain, for the wood was always trying to reclaim its own. The woodcutter understood that his survival was a structural feat, a masterpiece of tension and balance maintained by the constant intake of these dense, unyielding foods. As the tools are finally wiped clean of resin, the perspective shifts from the physical grind to the deeper, almost spiritual connection between the man, the meal, and the mountain of timber he has created. As the last echoes of the axe fade into the darkening thicket, a profound transformation occurs in the perception of the labor. The woodcutter, standing amidst the ruins of the giants he has brought down, ceases to be a mere worker and becomes a sculptor of civilization. This is the moment where the concrete reality of calories and sweat elevates into a deeper philosophical truth about the human condition. We see that the act of eating was not just a biological necessity, but a ritual of defiance against a world that sought to remain wild and untamed. The 19th and perhaps most significant dish was the communal ash cake, a large, flat bread bake shared among the crew at the very end of the shift. This bread was seasoned with the ground seeds of wild flax and hemp, providing a final surge of healthy fats to repair the micro-tears in the muscle fibers. As the men broke the bread together, the physical act of sharing represented the structural stability of the community. In the medieval mind, to eat was to conquer. To digest the forest was to assert dominance over the chaos of nature. You can feel the shift in the atmosphere, from the frantic violence of the workday to the heavy, grounded peace of the evening. The warmth of the fire reflects in their eyes, not as a tool for warmth, but as a symbol of the hearths they were providing for others. Every beam and plank that would eventually form a home or a cathedral carried within it the molecular signature of these forgotten meals. The woodcutter's struggle was the foundation of the era's architecture, and his diet was the invisible blueprint. This realization moves us beyond the surface of history, revealing that the strength of a society is measured by the endurance of its most humble members. It is a reminder that our modern ease is built upon a mountain of ancient grit, a legacy of iron-willed men who turned the hardest materials of the earth into the very fabric of our progress. The final embers of the brush fire flicker like dying stars against the obsidian backdrop of the English night, casting long, dancing shadows over the stacks of timber that now define the horizon. To look upon this scene is to witness the physical manifestation of 10,000 calories transformed into the skeletal structure of a future kingdom. You stand there, the cold air biting at your skin, yet you feel a strange, borrowed warmth from the sheer magnitude of the effort exerted on this ground. The 19 forgotten dishes we have uncovered are more than just recipes. They were the chemical catalysts for an entire civilization's expansion. From the density of the rye to the metallic sting of the blood porridge, every element was a calculated strike against the entropy of the wilderness. This is the ultimate revelation, that the history of humanity is not a record of ideas, but a record of energy. We are the descendants of those who could process the hardest grains and the toughest fats into the will to move mountains of oak and ash. As the woodcutters finally retreat into the darkness, leaving behind a landscape forever altered, you realize that the silence of the forest is no longer empty. It is filled with the invisible echoes of their endurance. Their legacy is not found in books, but in the very bones of the structures that still stand, and in the resilient spirit that continues to drive us toward the impossible. This journey through the grit and the grease of the past reminds us that we are capable of enduring far more than our modern comfort suggests. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel, because this is the only way to ensure you never lose access to the hidden depths of human resilience and the secrets of a past that shaped our very existence. If you watched this far, it's because you liked this case. Leave a comment saying, "You assiste hasta aquí," so that I can get to know you and know who really likes the stories here on the channel. Leave a like on this video to honor the sweat of those who came before us, and share this story with someone who needs to remember the raw power of the human spirit. The forest remains, the tools may change, but the fire of survival burns the same in every generation that dares to face the timber. The silence that now reigns over the clearing is a heavy, sacred weight, a stark contrast to the violent symphony of iron and wood that defined the last 12 hours. You stand in the center of a transformed world, where the towering giants of the morning have become the horizontal foundations of tomorrow's cathedrals, ships, and hearths. This landscape of stumps and sawdust is a monument to a biological triumph that we, in our era of synthetic convenience and effortless calories, can scarcely comprehend. The 19 forgotten dishes we have explored, the rock-hard rye, the medicinal infusions of spruce, the thick cauldrons of marrow and root, were not merely sustenance. They were the structural components of human survival. They represent a lost science of the body, a time when every man was his own chemist, calculating the precise ratio of fat, salt, and fiber required to keep the internal furnace burning against the encroaching frost. We have seen how the woodcutter's diet was a masterpiece of necessity, turning the harshest materials of the earth into the fluid, rhythmic motion of the axe. This is the profound truth that history often obscures. The progress of our species has always been fueled by the grit of the common laborer and the primitive energy of the soil. As you gaze at the stacks of timber, you see not just wood, but the crystallized sweat of men who refuse to be broken by the elements. Their endurance is woven into the very fabric of our civilization, a legacy of iron and ash that remains long after the names of the men themselves have faded into the mists of time. This realization is the final revelation of our journey, that the true power of humanity lies in our ability to transform the concrete into the symbolic, to take the raw materials of survival and forge them into the architecture of a future. The forest will eventually reclaim the clearing, and the moss will grow over the stumps. But the memory of this struggle, this visceral exchange between man and nature, serves as a reminder of what we are capable of when pushed to the absolute limit. We carry their resilience in our DNA, a dormant fire waiting for the next great challenge. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel, because this is the only way to ensure you never lose access to the hidden depths of human resilience and the secrets of a past that shaped our very existence. If you watched this far, it's because you liked this case. Leave a comment saying, "You assiste hasta aquí," so that I can get to know you and know who really likes the stories here on the channel. Leave a like on this video to honor the sweat of those who came before us, and share this story with someone who needs to remember the raw power of the human spirit. The fire may be out, and the woodcutters may be gone, but the story of their defiance against the impossible remains etched into the very heart of the world. Each grain of the wood we touch today contains the echo of a forgotten meal, and the ghost of a strike that refused to stop until the work was done. As the night fully claims the woods, the narrative of the woodcutter is complete, yet its meaning continues to vibrate through the centuries, challenging us to find our own source of strength in an ever-changing world. This is the finality of the blade, the completion of the cycle, and the enduring echo of the ancient iron. The deepening darkness of the forest is not a void, but a presence, a thick mantle that settles over the silent clearing like the dust of 1,000 fallen years. You remain there, an observer in the theater of exhaustion, where the air still tastes faintly of resin and the metallic tang of worked steel. This is where the physical world meets the metaphysical, where the calorie, that invisible unit of heat, becomes the pillar of an empire. To understand the woodcutter is to understand the alchemy of the medieval world, the transformation of coarse grains and animal fats into the very bones of London, the the ribs of the Royal Navy, and the scaffolds of the great spires. We have deconstructed 19 forgotten dishes, but the 20th dish was the man himself, his muscles and tendons being slowly consumed by the relentless demands of the landscape. This is the structural reality of history that is never taught in schools. For every king who wore a crown, there were 10,000 men who wore only wet wool and calloused skin, fueled by the dense, heavy sludge of the forest's edge. You can almost feel the vibration of the earth as it finally settles from the day's trauma, the roots of the remaining trees tightening their grip in the soil as if bracing for the next dawn. The woodcutter's journey was a perpetual cycle of depletion and replenishment, a desperate dance on the edge of a caloric deficit that could lead to a slow, freezing death in the shadows of the oaks. But they did not die. They thrived on the edge of the blade. They mastered the chemistry of the marrow and the bark. They turned the bitterness of the spruce into the clarity of the mind. This resilience is the true heritage of the human spirit, a testament to our ability to adapt our very biology to the environment we seek to conquer. As you look at the timber once more, it is no longer just dead wood. It is a stored battery of human life, a collection of hours, breaths, and meals preserved in the grain of the oak. The story of the woodcutter is the story of the foundation of the modern world, a reminder that underneath the layers of technology and comfort, we are still the same creatures of blood and iron. Our needs have not changed, only the ease with which we fulfill them. But there is a danger in this ease, a risk that we lose the sharpness of the axe and the density of the rye that once made us unbreakable. By remembering these forgotten dishes, we reconnect with the raw necessity of our existence. We honor the sweat that laid the stones of our reality. We acknowledge that every great achievement begins with a humble meal and the courage to face the freezing morning with nothing but a tool and a task. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel because this is the only way to ensure you never lose access to the hidden depths of human resilience and the secrets of a past that shaped our very existence. If you watched this far, it's because you like this case. Leave a comment saying, "You assiste hasta aquí," so that I can get to know you and know who really likes the stories here on the channel. Leave a like on this video to honor the sweat of those who came before us, and share this story with someone who needs to remember the raw power of the human spirit. The embers are now cold, the tools are stowed, and the forest is at peace. But the legacy of the woodcutter's meal remains as the silent architect of our world. As you walk away from the clearing, you carry with you a piece of that ancient iron, a spark of that internal furnace, and the profound knowledge that we are built to endure, to work, and to never stop. The darkness is total, the silence is complete, and the history is written in the very soil beneath your feet. The transition is finished, the wood has been cut, the hunger has been sated, and the spirit of the woodsman lives on in the structures we inhabit and the resilience we carry within. The moon now hangs high above the jagged canopy, casting a silver pallor over the battlefield of timber and moss, where the fragrance of fresh pine needles still lingers like a ghostly incense. In this stillness, you are forced to confront the fragility of the human form against the monumental indifference of the natural world. The woodcutter was not a titan of myth, but a creature of flesh and bone, held together by the structural integrity of his diet and the sheer force of his will. We have walked through the sensory landscape of his survival, feeling the grit of the rye, tasting the metallic iron of the porridge, and smelling the pungent heat of the groot ale. These 19 forgotten dishes were the mortar in the walls of history, providing the caloric density required to transform the wilderness into the cradle of Western civilization. But beyond the protein and the fat lies a deeper truth about the nature of human labor. It is a sacred exchange where the body is traded for the future. Every swing of the axe was a withdrawal from the bank of life, and every meal was a desperate deposit to prevent total bankruptcy. You see the stumps not as scars, but as the footprints of a species that refuses to be contained by its environment. This is the ultimate lesson of the medieval woodcutter, that the spirit is fueled by the material, and the material is elevated by the spirit. The food was humble, even repulsive by modern standards, yet it contained the raw energy of the sun and the soil, concentrated into a form that could be wielded like a weapon. We often mistake our ancestors for being primitive, but their understanding of the body's requirements was a sophisticated engineering of necessity. They knew how to manipulate their own chemistry to ward off the cold, to sharpen the mind and to heal the joints using nothing but the resources of the very forest they were harvesting. This was a partnership of blood and wood, a symbiotic struggle that defined the boundaries of what was possible. As you prepare to leave this silent clearing, the weight of the timber seems to shift, becoming more than just a resource. It becomes a testament. The massive trunks are the physical manifestation of millions of hours of digestion and exertion. They are the silent witnesses to a time when a man's worth was measured by the volume of his output and the depth of his endurance. This story is not merely a record of what was eaten, but a revelation of who we are when all the luxuries are stripped away and only the raw mechanics of survival remain. We are a species of builders, fueled by the hardest grains and the darkest fats, driven by an ancestral fire that refuses to go out. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel, because this is the only way to ensure you never lose access to the hidden depths of human resilience and the secrets of a past that shaped our very existence. If you watched this far, it's because you liked this case. Leave a comment saying, "You assiste hasta aquí," so that I can get to know you and know who really likes the stories here on the channel. Leave a like on this video to honor the sweat of those who came before us, and share this story with someone who needs to remember the raw power of the human spirit. The path out of the woods is long and overgrown, but the light of the fire we have explored today illuminates the way forward. We carry the legacy of the woodcutter in every breath, in every movement, and in every defiant act of creation. The forest is quiet, but the history of the iron-willed is loud, echoing through the beams and rafters of the world they built for us. We stand on the shoulders of giants who were fueled by bark, bone, and brawn, and in their shadow, we find the strength to face our own wilderness. The journey is complete, the debt is paid, and the memory of the woodcutter's meal is forever etched into the grain of time.